Welcome back, everyone, as we continue on our hunt, our quest for entrepreneurial gold. I'm Tim Laskus, and this is episode 33. And before I share with you our incredible guest, I want to tell you that I want to give back to all of you listeners who've been showing me love, who've been showing up and listening to this rinky-dink podcast. I want to give you something free. I want to give you a free ebook. Just go to my website, timlaskis.com. That's Tim, Laskis.com. And this is a book that I wrote a couple of years ago, about back in 2007. It's titled Finding Your Costa Rica. And it details 5 powerful steps of how to take your life and turn it around. Same steps that I took to go from a loser and later earn my doctorate. Well, I guess I'm still a loser, depending on who you ask. But anyway, I think it's a great gift to all of you, and it is free. There's nothing you have to purchase. You're not buying some $1 million service and then give you a free book on top of that. No. This is the same book that I've got for sale on Amazon. And my wife said, "What are you doing giving away that book for free? You're selling it on Amazon." I said, "I know what I'm doing. I'm showing love to the listeners because you guys have been so kind, have been listening, have been just there for me, and I love it." So go to timlaskis.com, get your free ebook, put your name, your email address in there, and boom, you get it instantly. It also shares how I sold everything and moved to Costa Rica. I gave up my comfy job, sold my house, my cars, everything, even gave away my dog. And I boarded a plane to Costa Rica with just a few suitcases in hand to be with the woman of my dreams. And let me tell you, it was the most liberating moment of my life. And if you're thinking, yeah, that marriage probably didn't last. Hey, we're still married. We were married in 2006. I better get it right. She's listening. And we have a 3-year-old son, and he is the light of my life, let me tell you. But anyway, let's move right along, if I could talk. And our guest today is Michael Woodward. Now, Michael is the CEO of Woodward Design. They've built over 400 websites, and he teaches courses on web design. He's also the host and founder of Jumble Think podcast, where he helps dreamers and movers and shakers and innovators and influencers reach even higher goals. He's a fun guy. He's got lots of tips, good resources, and he brings it for you today. So sit back and enjoy.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests, entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Well, hello, everyone. Today's featured guest is Mike Woodward. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. It's a real privilege.
Yeah. Hey, you were telling me that you have all sorts of hobbies, and one is you're working on building a guitar out of popsicle sticks. Is that true?
Not so much popsicle sticks, but pretty close, that's for sure. I'm building an acoustic guitar, and I'm starting from literally raw wood. So just pieces of wood, cutting them down, making the back and sides, making the top, making the neck, doing all the assembly. So it's as raw as you can get. I'm not using a kit or anything like that. Been working on it for a while now, but I'm about halfway done now, and I think finally seeing the daylight into accomplishing that fun project.
Wow, my goodness. Now, did you go out and cut your own tree down, or like what? How'd you do? Like, where are you getting that wood from?
Yeah, so I've gotten wood from all kinds of different sources. There's some great online resources. I have a friend who recently just passed away, but he's based out of Canada, and he specializes in the wood for the top. So he'll send me wood that is basically cut down so that I join the tops and everything like that. But they're basically a rough thickness of the top, and then I've picked up wood from other places. But to answer your question, my parents had a tree on their yard that I'm actually in the process of milling for my second guitar that I'm going to work on. It's just a big old walnut tree. Going to cut it down and make the back and side blanks from that.
Wow, that's impressive. Man, I can't build anything, so I'm just like blown away by that. That is pretty cool.
I have a friend who actually says this. He's a professional builder. He builds guitars, but he also builds high-end furniture, specifically like cabinets and things like that. And he said, well, the reason I like making guitars, he said, was because there's no sharp corners that have to be perfect. There's just a bunch of bends that can be close. So that's his idea of making guitars. But he's pretty awesome at his guitars, and they're crazy. And it's great to learn from him. So,
wow. Now just don't, after you get it built, don't just get crazy and get drunk and playing something that you just go and smash your guitar down, like some of those like rock stars do.
Yeah. I've never smashed a guitar, but I've had things fall into guitars, which is as frightful. So especially when you're like, oh no, don't break the guitar. So,
well, that's cool. Well, Mike, we'll tell the listeners a little bit about yourself professionally and what are you currently working on?
Yeah. So, I am by trade a web developer and designer. I own a web development company, and I'm in a transition right now. I don't know how some people love sitting at a computer for 8 days. I know I don't. So what I love is the client aspect of interaction, dreaming with them, talking with them, coming up with ideas, and then coming up with strategies to solve their problems. So from a professional standpoint, one of the things that I really want to focus more on is sitting down with a client that says, I have an idea. Where do I go from here? And then a website or social media marketing or traditional marketing may be a part of our strategy, and it may be something that we fulfill for the client. But what we're really doing for them is saying, there's a Hebrew word called acharit, which means the end. And what we want to start doing with our clients is saying, what is the end game goal here? Do you want to sell the business? Do you want to grow the business? How much in revenue do you want to create? How many visitors do you want to get? And then instead of just saying, hey, yeah, we can build a website for you, which is what we do now, we come in and say, oh, you need a website. This is what we put together. Instead of doing it that way, coming back and saying, well, what are the right tools to accomplish their dreams so that they're getting the solution that solves their problem, and really focusing on that direction. And with that, I'm also launching a podcast, and that podcast is focused on dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. It's live right now at jumblethink.com. Really having a lot of amazing and fun guests just talking about their dreams, how they got to where they are. And then the third part of kind of the transition is I really want to start something called idea camps. And it would be, either a week or a weekend, depending on the group's time commitment that they could do, where people who know each other or people who don't even know each other can come and learn about ideas, learn about crafting an idea, creating strategies, hear some amazing people speak, work with other people who are really creative and dreamers, and start putting action to their dreams in a really functional way, past just, hey, I've got this cool idea, I want to do this someday, really helping them say, this is the next steps of how you can create something that feeds your soul or feeds your heart, or the passions that are within you.
Well, I think that's a great idea to have these idea camps. I think so many people get stuck and they're just not able to push through. What are some of the common things that you see that really gets people stuck?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, there's this, I think ideas come from identity, understanding who you are, understanding your presuppositions. Presupposition is basically how you view the world based on your life experiences. So understanding who you are, your likes, your dislikes, the areas where you best perform. There's a great book called Now Discover Your Strengths, and it's in version 2 now, or 3, I'm not quite sure. And the whole focus there is saying, it's easy to say, I want to be well-rounded. It's easy to say, I want to be good at everything. But the reality is that you're not going to get to everything, and you're not going to be great at everything. And that's okay. But figure out what your strengths are, and then from there, operate from a place of strength and bring others to support you and your dream that are gifted in areas you're not. So maybe you come in and go, I'm like this super idea person, but I don't know how to put the strategy together. Well, helping that person build the relationships, whether it's hiring a consultant or an employee that can help with the strategy, or maybe they come in and say, I'm great at strategy, but I'm horrible at business management, watching the pennies and the dimes and the nickels and the quarters. And so helping people understand who they are is the first step. And then idea for a lot of people is easy. I have this great idea. The next step that is difficult for a lot of people is overcoming the fear of, well, what if I do this and it fails? Or what if I do this and I don't love it as much as I thought I would? Or what if I do it and no one else likes it? And all of those fears are real, but you really can't realize an idea or a dream until you put action to that. And so an idea has no power in itself. The idea's power comes from the action that steps out of the idea itself. So helping people overcome those fears is another area that's significant, and I think one of the hardest areas that people have to overcome in that process.
Wow. Well, kind of going back to, you talked about cashing in on your strengths. So it sounds like it's similar to a Gary Vaynerchuk who says, go all in on your strengths and forget about your weaknesses. And you're saying kind of similar and go in on your strengths, but hire out for those weaknesses that you have. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. And I think the reality is that if you try to be a generalist, if you try to be good at everything, then you're not really a master of a specific thing. And the more you can become a master of a specific domain, whether that's a specific aspect of business, whether that's a specific mastery of a hobby or a passion or whatever that is, until you master that, you're only going to be mediocre, and no one likes mediocre. I think all of us can say, we've downloaded that app, whether it's on our computer or on our phone, and it has all the potential. The idea is phenomenal, but when the reality comes, it's not fulfilled well. So that app or that software just doesn't completely meet the goals, and you're struggling to overcome the limitations of the software that could be brilliant, but because it's mediocre, it doesn't really do the job well. And in the ideal world, the same thing happens in that if you focus on being well-rounded, you're never a master of anything, and you never can achieve to the fullness of your potential because things that you shouldn't be focused on are pulling you down. There's this saying that says that it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something. Well, the more time you hyper-focus on your strengths, the quicker you can get to that mastery position. Now, every time you take and do something that isn't the area you should focus on, you're actually losing momentum to becoming that master of that. You look at Steve Jobs, or you look at Bill Gates, or you look at, in the tech world, so many different people. One thing that could be said about Steve Jobs was he was not a master of everything, but what he was a master was of critical thinking and understanding the consumer. And you look at Bill Gates, and Bill Gates was not the best business guy, but he was an amazing developer building really solid software. And so these people then built a team around them that said, I'm going to pull in people that can reinforce the dream I have and fill in those gaps where I'm missing. And that's how they were able to build these killer companies. Now, they did hit the right time at the right market for people that wanted what they had. And that's a big part of it. But if Steve Jobs would have tried to go in and say, I'm going to build the computer and I'm going to run the business and I'm going to come up with new ideas, it would have slowed down the process of Apple becoming Apple. And even when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he focused on innovation and ideas and creating amazing teams, bringing people in like Johnny Ives and creating these teams that reinforced his passion for innovating and creating something that wasn't into something that is.
And what would you say to the listeners out there who are listening to you and they're going, okay, that makes a lot of sense. However, the only thing I have is time. I don't have a lot of money to hire out. And I have an idea. I don't have a lot of strengths. I have a lot of weaknesses, and I don't have a lot of money. Like, what would you say to these people?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think one, sometimes we want to do ideas quickly. I'm there. I'm doing that all the time where I'm like, I just want to see the end of where I know the potential is for my idea. Well, sometimes we just need to slow it down, and just go, okay, what is the least amount I have to do to make my idea viable? So a great point that a lot of incredible software people do when they're bootstrapping. And bootstrapping is basically saying, how many corners can we cut to get this to as bare bones but marketable as possible? So these guys come in and they say, this is the pieces we need for a viable product from day one. So one recommendation is to say, scale your idea back to something that can start generating income, that minimum requirement to make a product that's viable for people to buy it or use it. So, if 90% of your idea can happen at phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, but you're generating income at phase 1, then you can start using that revenue to bring in other people, bring in contractors, bring in staff, and those kind of things to help build your idea. So step 1, I would say, is figure out what the least amount of work you have to do and do it well to actually bring a product to market that's incredible. And then grow that product with features, with functionality, with all the bells and whistles, all the things that, make it pretty from the standpoint of, oh, that's really slick. Well, you don't need slick at the beginning. You need something that brings value to your customer, it solves their problem easily. And so step in there. The other thing I would say is to really step back and evaluate what's around you. So let's say you have an idea and your idea is to reinvent the wheel, but you only know how to make, the tire hub. You don't know how to make rubber and all that kind of stuff. Well, there might be someone in your community around you that your friends or family or a college buddy or whatever who can come in and say, I don't know how to make a tire hub, but I do know how to make rubber. And then find those people who may have similar passions or want to support your dream that will come in and say, hey, you're not skilled in this area, but I am, and I either love you or, hey, we can partner in this and do this together, and we can take on each other's weaknesses, and I can step in where you're weak and you can step in where I'm weak, and we can do this together.
Wow, I love. Yeah, that's great. And to be able, because I think so many people they get stuck and they just give up. They're like, well, I need money to get going. But you're saying just bootstrap it, get the bare minimum you need to bring your idea to market, and then worry about adding bells and whistles along the way as funds start to come in.
Yeah, and you've got to, in the real world of development from a software standpoint, you look at these companies who are creating, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever that is. Instagram's a great example. It was a very simple, very easy piece of software. Now, yeah, there's a lot of development time in the back end. There's a lot of thought out processes that are happening from a software standpoint. But if you think about the viability, Instagram and Twitter don't really do all that much except connect people together. Instagram, of course, around photos, Twitter around short snippets of ideas. And so when they came to market, they brought a very trim, a very hyper-focused product that filled a need better than anyone else did. For their consumers. And so those are great examples of, yes, there was a lot of investment in those companies and a lot of development time and a lot of functionality. But, Instagram could have come in and said, hey, we want to build a better Facebook around images and video and have it be incredibly bloated and not meet the customer's need. But instead, they scaled it back to what was viable to get them going, to get it launched and start becoming profitable.
Wow. Yeah, those are great examples. And I love that. And so I think for the listeners out there, they've learned a lot just kind of hearing you up to this point. What would you kind of offer as a resource for the listeners that's been helpful along the way? Either something you found online or maybe a book.
Yeah, there's a couple great resources that I tell people always to do. The first one is The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkinson. And it's kind of an allegory book. It's fictional with function towards the end. Basically, it's about a character called Ordinary who wants to be a somebody. And it's following his journey to chase his dream and create his dream feeling that I don't want to just be a cog in the system. I just don't want to be living the mundane. I want to create something special. And it's about his journey, the obstacles, the triumphs, the things he encounters along the way. And in that book, you can really engage and say, oh, I can take that away and apply it to my life. And it covers everything from when you have an idea, who's your support network and how are they supporting you? And it does it in a fun, fictional way that tells a story, and then you're just gleaning all these little gems of information. So that would be number one. And the second thing is that there's a guy named James Altucher. He has a podcast called The James Altucher Show. And he has a concept that's lists of 10, which is basically what's your problem, what's the idea, and you put that at the top, and then you write a list of 10 solutions to that problem, 10 ideas off of that idea. And basically it's not to be used, although it can be used in the real world, it's more to be used to exercise the idea muscle. So whether you're an entrepreneur of a large corporation that's grown it into an amazing thing, those lists of 10 could be ways you could overcome obstacles that you have. Now, you could be a person that has an idea, and you could say, my idea is to create that new wheel. Well, you could come in and write a list of 10 to say, what are 10 possible solutions to make a better wheel? And so just that, doing one of those a day or two of those a day, and they don't have to be long. They can take you 5 minutes, and you just, write them down. They can be stupid. They can be funny. They can be realistic. They could be pie in the sky dreams. No matter what it is, it's coming back and just making your muscle of your brain work in a creative fashion to overcome obstacles and come up with solutions. And so if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, one of the things you always have to do is overcome obstacles. Well, if you have a tool like that, it helps you have the power to think differently in those moments of crunch time to come up with solutions. So those are two quick things that I would recommend.
Wow, great resources. So the first is called Dream Giver, which is a book. And who is the author again?
That's Bruce Wilkinson.
Bruce Wilkinson. And then the podcast is, can you spell it? His name is James. How do you spell his last name?
That is a great question. It is
Altucher.
Altucher.
Altucher. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for those tips. Now, Mike, when did you realize you wanted to be an entrepreneur? How did you make that initial step too?
Yeah. Well, I think my entire life I've been a dreamer. I've always had ideas. I've always had thoughts where like, oh, I could create this. I could create that. When I was choosing a vocation coming out of college, I looked at a whole bunch of options. I looked at working in the pro audio world, which I have. I've looked at working at churches, which I was on pastoral staff of a church for several years in California. And then I looked at all these other career paths. And so I ended up becoming a pastor at a church. So I oversaw worship, music, and youth at that church. And it was a lot of fun. Well, the economy tumbled in 2007, 8, 9. And a lot of the revenue for that church came from the real estate market. It's a church in a very poor area and deals with a lot of recovering addicts, meth addicts, and at-risk youth and children. And so the senior pastor came and said, hey, we can't afford to pay you. We love you. And they said this to all the staff. So a bunch of us just said, hey, we're going to volunteer and see that the mission of this church continues. But while we're doing that, we're going to go get jobs in the real world of business or whatever the individual decided or how they were going to maintain being involved. So for me, I had to make a decision. What is it that I want to do now that I can't do what I was trained to do? And I could have found a job at another church, but that wasn't, I believed in where I was at. So I wanted to invest in them. Well, a friend of mine said, hey, Mike, I need some help with my company. We're transitioning from a marketing company into a web design and development company. And I know that you're really good with people. Why don't you come and work for me? Well, to truncate the story, to really shorten it down, I went to work for him and I ended up buying out his company and another company and really growing my business in the web world. And in that entrepreneurial spirit of like building teams, of building ideas, building systems, that's where I really was able to take what was always a part of me and apply it into something that I was creating on my own. So that's kind of where I stepped into that world of entrepreneurship. And that was in 2008, 2009. And I've been doing that since.
Wow. With the recession and its impact on many people, I never really thought about the impact on churches. And that's an interesting story. And it makes sense that, the churches would be impacted as well.
Yeah. And, when you have a church that the majority of people give to the church, but all of them live under poverty, it's not a lot of money. So the money's being made out somewhere else. And in this case, it was a senior pastor who said, I'm going to start businesses to support the church. The key one being a real estate business. And when you're sitting on 14 houses in Northern California that are worth millions of dollars, you don't have a lot of money to go around at that point.
For sure. And, now that we're talking about money and finances, what was your lesson growing up around money? Did you ever have that talk of, okay, Mike, this is how you make money and this is how you save it?
No, in my family, we didn't talk about money much at all. There's moments where we had enough and there were moments where, things were tight, but we always had what we needed at the moment. And so there wasn't ever a discussion between me and my parents or anything like that, where it was like, hey, this is how you manage money and this is how you do that. And this is how you invest and all of those elements. So I've just kind of learned about finance as I've gone, and my parents are awesome and they've taught me so many incredible lessons. Finance, unfortunately, wasn't one of those that was a strong lesson. But what they did teach me were things like service, serving others, loving people, being involved in community and really caring for people, which I think are incredible lessons. But like I said, the finance part, I just kind of learned as I went. Met people along my journey of life that were financial planners or were involved in business or dealt with money at some kind of level, and just kind of learned and then read online quite a bit, researched investing, stock markets, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, all of those kind of different financial instruments, and just kind of learned it on my own. And it's always fascinated me, the whole stock market, the whole investment world. But, personal management of money is not something that I would say I'm an expert of. So that's for sure.
Well, your story of not really having that direct education early on is a similar one that I continue to hear. It's almost like marriage. Nobody was really taught how to be a good spouse in a marriage. They just kind of learned along the way and made their own mistakes. And sometimes it can be a tough lesson to learn for people, for sure. And when you were going through that recession, when you were at the church, and I'm sure it was a very stressful time for you, was that one of the most mentally stressful times for you?
Actually, it wasn't, strangely. And that's right around the time I got married and everything like that. And I had a year before all of the economy stuff started to tumble, taken a pilgrimage. And a pilgrimage is kind of going away and doing something for the purpose of self-discovery, spiritual enlightenment, whatever you want to say, but it's about learning. So I went to China about a year before, and just in that time of serving people that were in refugee camps, kids that were abandoned, just different things like that, I just had a big piece going into that new year of like, everything's going to be okay. So that really carried me through that. The moment that I would say was my meltdown moment, if you will, of just, the world is collapsing around me, happened several years later. I had ran a successful web design and development company, which I still do. And at the time we had 13 people on our staff full time. And we're creating crazy stuff. We're working for Fortune 500 companies, creating websites, client portals, all kinds of stuff. And one of our clients had something happen and they weren't able to pay us $60,000. And for a small business with 13 people working for you, $60,000 could have been $1 million. It just felt like the biggest shot in the gut. Just like, my world is going to fall apart. And so in that, we had to make really dramatic and hard decisions of survival, and that impacts real people. So not only is it the financial end of things of, this is horrible, But it's also the emotional, these are my friends. These are people I love deeply who have helped me build something. And now I'm having to make decisions that are going to affect their lives, and none of them are easy. And it was those moments of just trial and going through the fire of like, how do I survive this myself? How do I love well the people that work for me? How do I love a client who, because of stuff that happened, can't pay me what we're owed? And those lessons build a lot of faith for decisions you have to make in the future, because it's easy to make known decisions when you go in and say, I know if I make this decision, this is the outcome. It's hard to make unknown decisions, but the moment you start doing that and you start making decisions going, this really sucks, but you make those decisions and you get on the other side and you go, that was the right decision and things are okay. Or that was the wrong decision and things are okay. You start learning that it's not just about the decision you make, although that decision's important because you really need to make wise decisions. But it's about how you respond after you make that decision. Because sometimes you go, that was the best decision I ever made, and you run with it. And sometimes you go, that was the worst decision I could have ever made. Now I adjust. And, a great mentor of mine said one time, every decision has a consequence. Sometimes it's a great consequence, and sometimes it's a bad consequence. But the consequence is there, and you have to deal with it, and then you move forward. And that's life. And that's kind of the lesson that I took from that.
Wow, that's a wonderful lesson. And how important is faith in your life and being able to handle difficult issues?
I think there's a couple of things in my life that are massively significant. Faith is the cornerstone of that. And it is the foundation. I believe personally, and this is why I believe in the power of humanity and people so much, is that I personally believe there is this God who loves us desperately and created us for purpose. And in that, I think that when we invest in each other, when we invest in loving one another through rough times, through great times, that is the best of humanity. And that is what we were created to do. It's right in the scripture that, not to get too Christianese or anything like that on you, but the one command Christ that actually gave, the one command that Jesus gave was that we love one another. And I think right now in the climate of our culture, that's a lesson that we need to be listening to more than ever. And so for me, faith is the foundation of everything I do. And when I'm working in business, I filter that through, am I loving my client? And am I doing the best for them? Even if there's a loss for me, am I loving them well? Because if I do that, everything's going to be okay, because that's the foundation of just life. And outside that foundation of faith, I think the foundation of family and network of community is such a significant thing. And I think they go hand in hand. Faith and community are so intertwined and so significant. When you get those two aligned, powerful things happen. I always say that Facebook is, I just blanked on what I said. So Facebook is false intimacy without responsibility. So Facebook is false intimacy without responsibility. It is easy as a voyeur to watch the lives of people we have known or don't know without the responsibility of saying, I have to react. When I see a friend on Facebook that's lost a parent or lost their job, or they celebrate a great moment of breakthrough in their life, there's no responsibility on my end to respond to them. And so when we have true community and when we have true faith that intertwine the two together, all of a sudden when somebody loses their job, it's no longer just, hey, sucks to be you. Sorry, things are bad. I hope things are better. Thinking of you. It becomes, it's my responsibility to be a part of their life to help them. When they've lost their job, maybe they could use some groceries. Maybe they could use a ride somewhere. Maybe, I've had friends that have gone through rough situations. Maybe they just need a place to crash for a while. One of the best things someone ever said to me was that in marriage, if you love the other person more than you love yourself, and they're doing the same thing, you can overcome any obstacle. And I think it applies more than just in marriage. I think it applies to civilization, that when we start saying, I'm going to sacrifice sometimes what's best for me, and love the other person and put their needs ahead of mine. Well, if we're doing that, and if more and more people are doing that, then we're never going to be in need. We're never going to be in a place of just brokenness, because we're all going to have each other to do life together and say, I'm here when you need help, and you're here when I need help.
Wow. That's a very powerful message. And I think more people need to hear from entrepreneurs like yourself with that message, because there's a false idea out there that if you're an entrepreneur, you're into, starting your own business, that you're greedy, you're taking people's money, and you're dishonest. And that's just not the case.
Well, and I think outside of that, there's a lot of lies that are just going around that are very political right now on both sides of the sphere, that are saying, oh, like you said, business owners are just greedy. Well, no. There are greedy business owners out there, but there are a lot of business owners like me who are trying to do the best. When I was struggling with trying to figure out how we were going to survive, I was still trying to figure out how I could pay my guys better, and things like that, where it just doesn't make any sense. But there are business owners who are doing amazing initiatives to send their employees back to school or give them better health care. And there's these narratives of like, hey, give me stuff for free, or the business person isn't taking care of me if they're not doing X, Y, and Z. And what people aren't seeing is the back end of business, that some of those business people who are creating massive revenue may not actually be seeing any of that revenue themselves. There were times in my business where my guys were getting paid 2-3 times more than I. And it was because I wanted to treat them fairly and well. Now, somebody could come in and say, well, you should be paying them more. Well, yeah, I could, but then I'm living on nothing. There are sacrifices that business owners and entrepreneurs make that no one ever sees, that those business owners never talk about. And those sacrifices shouldn't be looked down upon with greedy eyes of what other people can take from it. I think that's just really selfish on people outside of the business world that don't understand all the nuts and bolts of what makes a business and all the risk and all the heartache that goes into it.
For sure. And what would you say has been the most fulfilling moment during your journey?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of them. I think creating a place where we encouraged our employees to dream. I think that's really, really significant, because we always want the people around us to know that their dream is significant in our eyes. So that's important. But I think one of the coolest things was we had built a system, a client portal, and other things for a major company that works in the tech industry. And I get a phone call. I'm in an airport, probably in Atlanta at that time. And they're like, where are you? And we had worked really, really hard. And this specific product was being used by every Fortune 100 company in the country. They used this software to communicate important information and with their clients. And I get a phone call, and I'm in the airport, and they go, where are you? And I'm like, I'm sitting in an airport. They're like, are they showing CNN? I'm like, yes, they are. So I go over, and here's my client talking about the work that they're doing, and everything we had built was sitting right behind them on screens and everything like that. So that's one of those moments where you see all this hard work come together and you're getting the notoriety. Now, yeah, there's a lot of people that have no idea that we built that software for this specific company. But to see people talking about how great and how it changed their business. Another business came to us and said, hey, you came up with an idea that affected our business, and it created a third of our revenue for our business that never existed before. Those moments where we can really embrace and see the fruit, see the outcome of our work and how it benefits our customers and makes their life better. Those are the moments we celebrate, and those are the moments of victory that we just really love.
Wow, Mike, with your philosophy of life and business, no wonder it's difficult for you to be able to identify just one fulfilling moment, because all of that comes back to you and just in tons and tons of just landing in your lap, because you're giving so much of yourself that it does come back.
Thanks. That means a lot. I appreciate that.
That's excellent. And unfortunately, we're at the end of the show. But before we leave, Mike, I want you to tell the listeners where they can find you online and your podcast and all that great stuff.
Yeah. So Our real focus is we're rebranding the entire company under a new company called Jumble Think. And just as it sounds, Jumble Think. And the easiest place to find us is at jumblethink.com. And you'll see the podcast. We have several episodes out now, and you can hear from amazing people telling their stories of how they've overcome adversity and created something special. The other thing that you can do is, if something that I've said really struck a chord with you today and you just want to toss an idea out to someone and get some feedback, email me at hello@jumblethink.com. I always love hearing from people, and I always love encouraging people on their journeys.
Wow. All right, everyone. Michael Woodward at jumblethink.com. Be sure to visit him. Mike, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me on. It's been so much fun.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlascos.com.